All right, friends and neighbors, hello and welcome to the Low Brass U studio class. It is the studio class about brass. If you play the trumpet or the French horn, we'll give you a pass. I am your co-host, Connor Eisenmenger, and our esteemed leader, Zach Marley, is here. Shiny.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, that's true. I know. If you're a diligent subscriber with post notifications, you already know what this is all about. But I got a new euphonium, which is definitely, the lighting is a little bit too much for the luster of the euphonium right now. But yes, I got a Wilson 2900. So I've been pretty excited about playing that so far. I did an actual unboxing video, which was probably the most self-control I feel like I've had in a really long time, because I really got it right before a gig, and then I went to the gig, I didn't open it up, and then I got home from the gig, still didn't open it up because I was too tired to record the unboxing video, and then I woke up the next day, and then I unboxed it on camera.
That's a remarkable level of self-control.
That's definitely not typical me. That shows you how much I am dedicated to the Low Brass U channel.
That's not the Zach that I know. I'm very impressed. You grew a lot in this process.
Normal Zach would have decided that it was okay to be late to the gig because the euphonium just arrived.
That's what would have really happened. Yeah.
That's definitely the normal response. Not that I'm normally late, but certain things trump other things, and a new euphonium definitely would trump that. So
it takes precedence over a lot of things.
Right. So I'm getting used to the euphonium. It's been pretty good so far. It's been pretty easy to play. For the most part, it's just been kind of better. There are definitely a couple of, not negatives, but definitely drawbacks. It's definitely heavier. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Which the euphonium's already not an ergonomic instrument.
Right.
So
it's not designed with humans in mind.
No, not really. That's what I tell all my students, literally just like that. I don't know if I stole that from you or...
I stole that from, I think, Doug Yeo's website when he was talking about the bass trombone.
I definitely used to frequent that website, so
yeah,
it's possible that I inadvertently stole that from him. So my apologies. Which I believe now he's on the carbon fiber train.
Is he really?
Yeah, at least there's footage of him playing recitals on a Dave Butler. I can't remember the number for their bass, but whatever their bass is, a C12.
That's awesome.
Let me see if I can pull that up here. See something.
C7.
Butler trombone. C12, I was right. I'm very
Wow.
proud of myself. Let's see if we can do a little close-up. Oh, it's like actually kind of perfect. If I can get it to be perfectly... Yeah, how about that?
Well, I can't see, but
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
sure it
I
looks
forgot.
beautiful. Don't ask me.
I got it to be just us in the corners and the bass trombone at the top.
Beautiful. I can't wait for 45 seconds from now to enjoy that.
It's not that much of a delay.
No, it's not. It's like 20.
Yeah, it depends on the thing. The Doug-E-O thing's at the bottom, and the way that I have these screens configured, I can't. Well, I can show it. It just takes a little bit.
I see it now. It looks great.
Well, yeah, it looks. But so Doug-E-O, I guess, is still playing his Yamaha with a carbon fiber bell, main tuning slide, and hand slide by Butler trombone. So that begs the question to me. So I guess it's a Yamaha valve section. Is that what I'm gathering?
I guess so.
It's a Yamaha IBL 822 with carbon fiber bell, main tuning slide, hand slide by Butler trombones.
Man, the future is here.
It really is. I'm honestly really excited about it. And I saw Butler trombones. Not that this is a Butler trombone, video podcast, but we can shout out Butler trombones a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
One thing that really just got my brain thinking was some client that was not, no name was given online, is doing a blind test with their colleagues, essentially, with a carbon fiber trombone that they painted brass colored.
Yeah. Now, see, that's the ticket. That's what I've been waiting for. Not the blind test, because I have faith in its success, but the aesthetic of it. Like, can they get me like a brass looking?
Let me see.
Butler
It was on
trombone?
their Facebook page, or it popped up on my Facebook feed. I'm not exactly
How do
sure.
I special order that? Because I would seriously throw down.
It made it seem like this was the first of its kind. But I mean, it's definitely not going to like fool you if you're up close necessarily. But I think the idea, I think it was for an orchestral trombonist. And so the idea is that no one, in the back of the orchestra, no one's going to know.
Right.
So I guess I forgot this part. It's just a slide.
It's just a slide.
Oh, you can't see that. Not that you would be able to see that anyway. But I think the slide is probably, that almost makes it more convincing.
Right.
There you go.
That's...
So you'll see it in a second.
All right.
But yeah, it's a Bach 50 bass slide. It says how to do a blind CF slide test with a carbon slide, and see if anybody notices. We painted a Bach 50 slide brass, not to draw any attention for an orchestral customer. This is going to be interesting. So
Wow.
I definitely think I think that'll be interesting, because I think when it's just the slide, I think it'll go pretty well unnoticed.
Right. Oh, see, that looks so slick.
Right.
I love.
How would you know? Like,
Nobody's gonna know.
nobody's gonna know. What do you mean they're gonna know? Yes. So I'm definitely excited to hear how that goes. I don't know if there'll be a follow up necessarily. I'm gonna adjust my mic up a little bit, physically, not audio wise.
I see.
There we go.
Little adjusting.
Should be a little bit better. But yeah, I definitely think that that's an interesting idea that I'm kind of curious about, and it makes sense. I mean, people have their stigmas about things.
Right.
So, yeah, we'll see. I definitely think that there's a carbon fiber trombone in my future.
Oh, absolutely. The future is carbon fiber.
I have been wanting one for a lot of the cover band work that I do, the top 40 stuff. A lot, because it's like going out in the crowd and stuff, it's like I get dents and dings on that 16 and it makes me sad, and carbon fiber, basically wouldn't do that.
Right. It's just more durable.
Right.
It's far less fragile, at least.
Right. So, I don't know, just dents on brass instruments that you take out in public, and there's a lot of things happening. You're more than likely going to get some sort of damage eventually.
Right.
So yeah, I definitely am interested in it. And also just, I do have some wrist problems. I think most of that stems from euphonium more than bass trombone, but I could be wrong. The euphonium stuff has always been a little bit of a problem for me. One thing with the Wilson that's a little bit, again, another little challenge. I know I'm only talking about the negative things so far. It's really great. I'm not going to try to downplay that. But the way that the wrist strap that I've been using, because of how low the brace is, or how high the brace is, if the weight's resting, here I got to undo the. If the weight's resting on my hand, then my index finger is far too high to press the valve. So maybe there's another way to do this brace that I'm not thinking of, but I might have to look into another alternative, or I guess just not use it.
That's a bummer.
So
I'm sure there's a way to workshop that.
Yeah, that's definitely like a small thing that, I can figure something out. Probably.
Just start using your ring finger.
Yeah, I guess. I feel that's still too high, but yeah, it's been great so far. It's in pretty good condition. There's one issue that if you want to see my genuine reaction to seeing some shipping damage, you can you can definitely enjoy that. But it's early in the process, but I called them today and we had some email back and forth, and it's too early to say this necessarily, but it seems like they're doing the right thing. So if once that becomes finalized and taken care of, I'll probably reveal those details, because I'm not really trying to shame them, because I think they are doing more or less the right thing.
Right.
So yeah, it's just it's a part of shipping horns. In a perfect world, I would have just gone to North Carolina and gotten the euphonium, but I don't really have the time for that right now.
That's a long schlep.
Yeah. So thanks for teaching bass trombone. Can't wait for auditions on tuba and bass trombone at TMEA this year. Good luck. Hopefully that goes well.
Nice.
I don't know if you can count videos on the internet quite as teaching, in this, at least these sorts of just performance videos, but if they help, they helped.
I think that's teaching. Teaching. Well, isn't there a certain institution around your area that says teaching through performance?
There you go.
If I'm not correct.
You are correct that is a thing. But let's see. General question: how not to get bored of playing? I don't know if this one is it. There it is. General question: how do you not get bored of playing? I think for me that's a pretty simple question with a simple answer, is that I do a lot of different things. I think that there is a good chance that I would get bored, and I think people do get bored doing the same thing. And the gigs that I play, a lot of the same exact type, sometimes they can get a little bit boring. But I think that's, I wouldn't say playing has gotten boring yet, at least not for me. And I think it's just because I'm always doing different things. One day I have a euphonium in my hands playing a band excerpt with a student. The next day I'm playing top 40 music on trombone. The next day I'm playing a tuba concerto. Keeps it pretty entertaining.
Yeah.
What about you, Connor? How do you keep from getting bored?
That's a tricky question, and I was trying to rack in my brain thinking of what angle I was going to go to approach this answer, and then I thought back to my freshman year at WKU, at good old Western Kentucky University, home of the Hilltoppers.
Top them hills.
Topping hills. Some of my best friends were the seniors of that class. Not all music majors, some of them other ones, but it was funny because I had a lot of friends who were seniors in high school where I grew up, and then they all went off to college, and a good number of them went to Western Kentucky. I didn't see them for a couple of years, and then I got there as a freshman. They're there again. We're friends, we're hanging out. Some of them were still music majors, some of them weren't. A lot of them were warning me about becoming a music major. They said, don't do it, you're gonna burn out, it's not fun anymore, I don't enjoy this is no fun. And I was like, wow. These people are older than me, they have more experience, I should heed this warning. And I said, as soon as I get bored and this is no fun for me anymore, I will quit and I'll stop. And then that never happened, and then I got another degree, and then I moved to a city and played for 3 years, and I moved to another city and I'm playing here for a year, and it's still not boring. And the reason why, for me, I think, is the same reason I get hooked onto other things and kind of hyper-focus, is like novelty is the big thing, like Zach was saying, like mixing things up and doing a variety of different things. And then for me, and I noticed this particularly once I got out of school, was kind of creating my own urgency in like proximity of like the time that I have to play, like setting deadlines for myself for projects and holding myself accountable to other people kind of like really gets me motivated to like, I have to do it now because I said I'll play it in front of people. And then that kind of ties into the other thing, which is like the community. And it's like the only reason that I'm here, and I can't speak for everyone in this low brass studio class, it's because I was a band kid in middle school, and I have never stopped being a middle school band kid. It's like I love the hang, I love being stinky, I love playing the trombone, I love learning new notes, I love hanging out with my friends, and I pretty much have just like done that and just like turned it into something that looks like professional or continued education for the rest of my life. But it's really just like I've just capturing that feeling the whole time, just been continuing to enjoy that music making process. So for me, it's a community is like the biggest extra musical thing. But inside of music, variety, due dates, proximity, like general responsibility things kind of keep it interesting to me.
Yeah, definitely. Don't know if you've heard of A&M Commerce. Of course, I've heard of A&M Commerce. Doing a master class, you're playing in a master class in November. It looks like that's awesome. Is that with Jeff Baker, Dr. Jeff Baker? If so, tell him I said hello. But
awesome. That'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. One thing that I wanted to show also that this did happen since the last time that we did some live stream action. Got to play a few notes on a contrabass trombone.
Oh, that's right. I played that video on our Chromecast on our television at like 9:45 in the evening. And the volume was kind of loud, and I got in a little bit of trouble, but I was excited.
Did you also get in trouble because my low C was very sharp, or did that?
I don't even know if we made it that far in the video, I'll be honest with you.
You didn't get to note 7?
No, you was fine. I thought it sounded good.
It doesn't really have as many positions as one would like.
Are you talking about with that, or did you like go like the like extendo 7?
Yeah, it doesn't really have that note.
I imagine with the travel distance being, they have the like the true slide, they're trying to make it like a regular trombone slide, that when you start trying to do tricky things like extendo positions, the math probably just gets weird, or you run out of tube at the wrong time. Yeah,
it's a running out of tube situation. The slide portion, I mean, you can see in that picture, it's very similar to a bass trombone in just like size, other than it's doubled over on itself. But I think ultimately the slide section isn't exactly double. It's actually more, it's a little bit under that. So at least for me, I didn't really feel like there was a true 7th position, which means there's probably not a triggered, 6th position. Eli has a good question. This is a good question for probably both of us, if I can pull it up. And also, shout out to Eli. How many colleges did you audition for undergrad? I auditioned for 2, one across the street from your high school and one in the University of North Texas. Those are the only 2 that I auditioned to, and at the time, I kind of had the mindset that I was going to go to UNT unless I didn't get in, and then I was going to go to the University of Louisville for a year and then go to the University of North Texas, or I was going to go to the University of Louisville for 2 years and then go to the University of North Texas. That was kind of my plan at that time, and I ended up getting in, and that mindset didn't really change. So that's kind of how it went. I don't regret it, but it would have been interesting to see if I'd gone to, or taken some other auditions. Maybe I could have found another school that I was interested in. No one seemed to tell me that I should probably audition for more. What about you, Connor? I think I know, but
2 schools.
And what were those 2 schools, or do you not want to answer that?
What do you think the 2 schools were? Do you know this story already?
I feel like I must know this story. I mean, obviously, Western Kentucky.
Right.
That's obvious. You had to have auditioned there. Was it not the University of Louisville?
It was not the University.
Was it in Kentucky? Let's play 20 questions. Was it in Kentucky?
It was not in Kentucky.
Indiana?
Nope.
I don't know this story. Okay, let's hear it.
This is a good. I don't tell this one often because usually there's a couple of parts to this story, but I only auditioned to Western Kentucky University and Cincinnati Conservatory of Music.
I should have had that one. I think I did know that. Now, looking back, I did know that.
Let me paint you the picture of my audition at the Cincinnati Conservatory of Music. The degree program for which I was applying for, trombone performance. Because I just saw the word trombone, and I thought...
You liked that word.
Trombone is trombone. That's probably the one I'm looking for. I'm driving. Well, the morning of, I go on Cincinnati Conservatory of Music's website and print off the audition material. Because no one told me that I should probably look at it beforehand. Maybe someone did. I don't know. I wasn't in my...
You didn't look at it beforehand.
I didn't look at it before. I'm looking at tenor clef for the first time in my life going, what is this? Looking at Ride of the Valkyrie, which I'd never looked at on paper before. At that point, it was just like a song from movies and things to me. And so I get up to the building and I take a theory test and I go to the trombone professor's office for my audition. And he goes, all right, what are you going to play for me today? Knowing good and well what the audition material was. And I was like, can I play some jazz? Because I didn't know there was a difference between a jazz studies degree and a trombone performance degree. And he just goes, no. And so I tried to read the other stuff and he's just like, all right, thanks. Didn't get it. So that didn't work out.
That's all right.
It's a cautionary tale of look up audition stuff before you decide to drive to the audition. Or at least at some point earlier than that. Now it all worked out, and I ended up going to a great school that I love, that I'm hopefully going to be back at this year. And then Zach and I met and we became Texas friends, and it's all good. But yeah, I was not prepared for that one.
Yeah, maybe another fun thing would be how many schools did we apply for other degrees? How many schools did you apply for master's degree?
2.
What was the second one?
It was North Texas was the first one, and the second one was, again, Cincinnati Conservatory of Music.
Did you learn your lesson?
I learned my lesson. I got in that time, but ended up deciding to go to Texas. But I always think back to that. I think it would have been a ton of fun. I met some really, really nice people. I was on campus, and I've still kind of kept in touch with a few of them. So super, super good program if you ever are in the area and are looking at schools in Ohio.
Yeah, I took lessons there in high school.
It's an outstanding school.
For a little while.
Did you really? I didn't.
You knew that, right? Yeah.
I knew that.
When I was a sophomore in high school, I took.
But it was tuba lessons, right?
Yes, with Tim Northcutt. But yeah. So for my master's, I auditioned at the University of Memphis, Baylor University, and also Northwestern University, where I ultimately attended. And it was a little bit of a difficult decision choosing between the three, but I ultimately chose Northwestern. Chicago's pretty cool. That was part of it for sure.
Chicago was very cool.
But yes, and then we have another couple of questions here. How do I play high notes on trombone, and does having a dent on the mouthpiece affect the range? Let's start with the easy one.
That's a lot of questions.
Let's start with the mouthpiece dent one. What I'll say I'm assuming that you're talking about having a dent in the mouthpiece shank. I would definitely say that's not a good thing. There are definitely some weird characteristics that can come about from that. The good news is it's a pretty easy fix. If you have any repair shop in town, that's about like a 10-second fix that I would hope they wouldn't charge you for. I can't speak for any establishments. It's a pretty quick fix. I personally own the tools to do it, and I have fixed several mouthpieces of my students. It's actually not a bad thing for me to start keeping with me, because I think sometimes people just have dents in their mouthpiece shank and don't talk about it, and that's the end of it. You should never have a dent in your mouthpiece shank. It's a really quick fix. A not so great solution, but a solution that sometimes can work, is if you have a trumpet mouthpiece, you can, in a tuba mouthpiece. I guess it won't work for a trombone. Never mind, because it would be too big. But yes, there's a truaning tool, and you take that and you take a mallet. It's a pretty quick thing. So I wouldn't say that it officially just that's why you can't play this high note that you were trying to play, but I can assure you it is not. It's not the desirable way of doing business. Would you agree, Mr. Eisenmenger?
Absolutely.
And then I guess I'll throw the other question to you. How do you play high notes on the trombone? Can you tell me?
Very carefully. I think we talked about it a little bit last week. It's you won't be comfortable in your attic of your house unless you spend considerable time in the attic of your house. And so we actually talked about a little high range exercise that Zach and I like to do, and it's one of those ones that whenever I'm working on like getting up into the high range, I like to start from a point of comfort and stability in my playing, where I can hear the sound that I want really, really well, and then I explore upwards. And every time I explore upwards, like I'm trying to find a new note or trying to get comfortable on a note that's like becoming in my wheelhouse. I think those are kind of two separate skills. But you're always like coming from a place where you're relaxed and then stretching yourself to grow your range, so that you're not just developing a new repertoire of notes that you can play with a ton of tension, because then they're not going to be super duper practical in the wild. So arpeggios are great for that. So I think Zach and I are quite partial to the arpeggio.
Scales.
Real hardcore, you can do those like half step, like Remington type thingies up there. I'm really bad at those, but they do help.
Yeah, definitely one of my trombone specific things that I like to do, that the person who taught both of us at the University of North Texas, Tony Baker, would have me do sometimes in lessons, is glissing these high notes. So sometimes what I would do is, if I have a student that's like, let's just pick a note. Let's say high F, like 2 ledger lines, is not working out. What I would do is I would probably have them play a C, like middle C being middle C in the piano, in 6th position, which is not where we normally play it, and then try to gliss all the way up. And then if we didn't make it, we'd go C, D flat C, C, D, C, C, E flat C, C, E natural C, C, F, C, and try to go all the way like that. And then when that gets really easy, do that same sort of thing, but on a higher partial.
Right. It's a kind of like a magic trick that you can do with your students, and they kind of freak out the first time you do it. They say, I can't play a high F. And you say, well, you can play a C, right? And yeah, I can play a C. Well, you can play a high F. Let me show you. And then you go, and it's like, wow, it's the same shelf on the trombone.
Yeah.
It's always a fun day.
So that's a good way to kind of work on it, because it does it as gradual as possible. That's one of those things I almost wish when I teach trombone, or when I teach euphonium and tuba, sometimes it's like, it'd be cool if I could do this with you in this exact way. Right. But that's okay. Let's see, we got a couple of other things. So we've got Eli saying that he's having a lesson with Dr. Northcutt. Enjoy. Hope it goes well. And that's definitely a good thing to be doing as you're applying for college, is have lessons with people. I think that's arguably, to me, the best thing you can do. You will learn so much about the professor there. They'll know about you. I would say that's one of the best things I did for my master's degree, is that I had lessons with everyone that I was trying to study with or thinking about studying with. And that gave them a chance to meet me and see if I was a teachable student, because that's another part of it that you don't always get to see in a lesson. Right. And they probably learned that they probably thought I was teachable from that lesson, and maybe I was, maybe I wasn't. But yeah, so that was a big part of it for me, was going to have lessons with all these people, which is difficult with, geographic regions and things. So that was definitely a struggle. I mean, I drove up from Texas to Chicago to have a lesson, essentially, with Rex Martin when I was an undergrad.
I would say maybe in these modern times, I think you'd be hard pressed to find a professor that if you asked and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about coming to your school, would you be okay with like a quick Zoom lesson just to talk and play a little bit?" I highly doubt they would just say no, buzz off. And if they did,
that's a good sign. Maybe that's not the school for you.
Yeah, maybe don't go there.
That's definitely I think that's definitely true. I know that a lot of professors are doing that sort of thing, and I've done it with some of the colleges that I've teached at that reached out to students and done that sort of a thing. So we got a couple other things. Is high range different on bass trombone? There are a couple ways we can answer that question, because I'm not sure what question exactly you're asking. So I'm going to answer one way, which is, does bass trombone go up as high, which is maybe one of the ways that question could be interpreted. So I would say that in general, the best bass trombonists can play mostly as high as the best tenor trombone players. Maybe not always quite as high, but pretty close, generally speaking. And there's music that says that should be done also. There are bass trombone solos that go up to C's, D's, D flats, that sort of range. I'm sure that there are some that go higher, but I can't really think of any that aren't, what's a good way to put it? Sometimes there are sound effects that are used in pieces. We'll put it that way. But as far as pieces that are, that's a really important note that you need to play that exact note, it does get up there sometimes. And I think that that's important. And with pretty much all my bass trombone students right now, I have 2 bass trombone students, I told them that, you basically have to do everything that a tenor trombonist does and more. And I think that that's pretty true. Do you have any thoughts, Connor?
Just one thought to kind of consider. I can't remember where I was reading this. I think it was maybe something that James Markey posted. I can't remember. I shouldn't cite incorrect sources here, but it was the difference in bore size between your.
Oh, I remember him posting that.
Going to a 562 bass trombone versus the distance between your 547 bore Bach 42 going down to a 496 or 508 slide on your pea shooter. The distance between bass trombone and tenor trombone is smaller than the difference between what we call a tenor trombone and what we also call a tenor trombone, which is a pea shooter. And for some reason, we think that people need to go switch the instruments and get practically a different degree to go study the bass trombone, when in reality, the distance between, and for people who play the tenor trombone who are just expected to play the alto trombone, they're just oh yeah, it's the same. How come we don't talk about the bass trombone the same way? It's an interesting thought. I don't have an answer for that, but it's an interesting thought that I always think about whenever I feel myself kinesthetically approaching the bass trombone. And it's sort of tuba or something,
Right, and I think a kind of counter, not argument, but a counterpoint to that is low range different on tenor trombone than it is on bass trombone? And it's there are some differences, and for the sake of this conversation, kind of assuming that there's a valve on the tenor trombone and there are 2 valves on the bass trombone, which I understand are assumptions. But for the sake of this argument, let's take that as fact, or that's what we're talking about right now.
That's fair. And
that means that there are only, technically speaking, so when I say technically, I mean with the exclusion of false tones, there are 3 notes that a bass trombone can play that a tenor trombone cannot play. And also that somewhat depends on valve tunings. But again, let's assume a B flat bass trombone with an F valve and a G flat valve. Tenor trombone can't really play the low Bs, so low B and pedal B, and double pedal B flat without a false tone. And a bass trombone can play those 3 notes. That being said, that's only 3 notes. And they're not necessarily the most important 3 notes or anything like that. So at some level, I like working in that range on tenor trombone as well, and it does show up in solo literature. I'm not saying you're gonna have to play a pedal C on an orchestral audition or something along those lines. But again, if it's my kind of philosophy, it's like if it's a note on the horn, I should be able to play it.
Right.
So that's kind of my thinking a little bit. Let's see. We've got how do I maintain the same tone quality in my pedal range when I'm playing soft? It's a good question. I don't know that many of us, or really any of us, do in that range.
Well, the question I think I would follow that up with is like, as opposed to like just like I feel like the tone. If we're talking about tone, like the collection of standing waves that's inside of the tone quality of a bass trombone, or what we're talking about, bass trombone.
Yes.
It could be.
Well,
low brass,
yes.
Low brass instrument, notwithstanding any
I
of them,
I assume.
trombones, tubas. Like if you put like a pianissimo pedal B flat on a spectrogram and a fortissimo pedal B flat on a spectrogram, I feel like you would get a menagerie of different tones represented in the louder one, particularly in the high frequency of it, than you would with the soft one. And so and that's something I always kind of like was confused by when I first started getting comfortable and like really critically assessing my sound in the pedal register. Was like which one of these versions of the quiet one is good? And I think that's kind of maybe part of what you're asking. It's kind of a tricky thing.
Yeah, I think I'd answer that question by saying you probably won't, and that might be okay. If we're talking about it as how does it keep the same quality in, like, if we just call that being good or bad, because that might also be kind of what you're asking here, is that you have a good sound when you play loud in the pedal range and you have a bad sound. If we accept them being different, but we want good for both, just different types of good, that could be kind of a different angle too. And I think doing a lot of exercises where you start loud and get softer on these notes can be helpful. So you're trying to kind of bring that sound from the louder dynamic to the softer dynamic. That kind of helps me a little bit with that sort of stuff. But I think at the end of the day, they're not going to sound exactly the same, and I'm not sure that they should. I think that that's also part of it. And that's why we play different trombones for different things. No one's saying a small bore can't sound, really sweet and full. It's just that if it has a smaller bore and a smaller bell, if you push it, it will get kind of aggressive faster, which in some styles of music is exactly what you want. In other styles of music is exactly what you don't want. And I was talking about this with one of my tuba students, and he was playing a 4/4 C tuba, which there's nothing wrong with a 4/4 C tuba, but what doesn't work out well is playing a 4/4 C tuba but playing it like it's a 6/4 C tuba. And so what was happening was he was maybe not getting his best sound because he was playing it like it's a bigger horn, playing too loud on it where it was starting to break up. And you get into these sorts of situations. That's why there are a lot of orchestral players, for all low brass instruments, that tend to play larger horns than in other places in music, I might say. And I think the reason for that is because you have the capability of playing loud without getting an edge to your sound that maybe a conductor might shake their finger at. Because sometimes it's not really about the volume that you play, it's also about the quality of that sound, and does it get harsh or does it get brittle, does it get bright, those sorts of words, which sometimes I feel like are meaningless with music, but we've assigned them to something.
I think, yeah, it gets weird and contextual. It's like, well, what is a bright sound of a low brass section? What does that actually mean? It's like, well, we can't actually quantify it and say here are the qualities of what it is, but we can tell you what it is when we hear it.
Right.
I keep going back to things I just learned. This is Dunning-Kruger effect in live performance. I don't actually know what I'm talking about, but that This Is Your Brain on Music, or no, was it that? Yes, I think it was that book that I was reading a couple of days ago. All of my before bed books are just blurring together. I don't know what I'm reading. but they were talking about the definition of the word game. And it's like, what do we have an actual good definition for the word game that everything that we consider a game can fit into? Like, is every game competitive? Does every game have points? Does every game require teams? You know, it's like all of a sudden, like, the definition of a game is like really, really loose, but we can identify things that like kind of fit as part of it in the Venn diagram. And I think that brightness of tone and things like that we use is like really, really like wishy-washy terms. Like, I think it's okay to use them, but it's like we have to all kind of understand that there's kind of like these different concentric Venn diagrams all intersecting, where like bright can mean something in this context, but it means something else somewhere else. I did not mean to interrupt you and hijack that, but that was
oh no, all good stuff. I didn't feel slighted. We should probably get on to another question. You have a Shires bass trombone and a Shires bass trombone mouthpiece and need a new tuba mouthpiece. Would you recommend a Shires tuba mouthpiece if I like my Shires bass trombone one? I guess what I would say is that if you liking the Shires bass trombone mouthpiece does not necessarily mean you'd like the Shires tuba mouthpiece. Especially when you go from instrument to instrument, not always do mouthpiece manufacturers really do the exact same thing, and you probably don't want them to. You know, one of the things that, you know, both Connor and I play Dennis Wick mouthpieces, and one of the biggest reasons why I do, and Connor and I have talked about this, but I don't want to speak for him, is that the rims feel really nice. And those rims feel nice on tuba, they feel nice on trombone, they feel nice on euphonium, because the contour of that rim is essentially the same as far as I know. I'm not the manufacturer, but I believe them to be the same. And that's one reason why I do like playing them. But I don't know that, especially before being a Dennis Wick artist, I don't know that there was ever a company that I was playing that I liked all of their mouthpieces like that. Prior to being Dennis Wick artist, I was playing maybe half to 3/4 Dennis Wick stuff from all of my instruments. And so I guess what I would say is you don't need to have some level of brand loyalty to your mouthpiece arsenal. I don't think it's necessary, I guess is my point. But it's not like Shires makes bad tuba mouthpieces. That definitely wasn't the point of that. They make good tuba mouthpieces, and if you try one and you like them, or if you want to just buy one to try it, I don't really see anything wrong with that. Do you have any thoughts, Connor?
That's great. Yeah, I think that's all good stuff. And if you like it and you love it and you want some more of it, and that's what you want to do, go for it. There are other mouthpieces, and that's also both are valid choices to make. I would say if you have the luxury of going to try things out,
which is a luxury,
that's cool. Like, you know, if there's an instrument store that maybe has a bunch of different ones that you can try, or some sort of specific dealer regionally, that's cool. I would go with somebody that you really trust, like someone that you take lessons from, or a professional that you know, or somebody who could sit and really tell you what's going on the other side of the bell, you know, because that's a big important thing. But yeah, I would say mess around with it. I always tell people, like, I don't really know anything about mouthpieces. Like, I like the ones that I play on, but that's because I have smart people like Zach in my life that tell me what the different ones are, and then I just play them, and everything works out for me.
And I don't claim to be a guru or anything like that.
You know a lot more than I do.
Which is still nothing, you know.
And
like
we still have like people like Ryan Adamson that we're lucky enough to know that can tell us, oh, this is going on here, and this is this, and this is that. And
yeah, I think that's obviously trying is the best thing. You know, the kind of the next best thing to going to a store that has a bunch of mouthpieces to try is having a friend that has a bunch of mouthpieces to try, or having taking lessons from someone that has a bunch of mouthpieces to try. Literally tomorrow, which I'm glad that I'm remembering this, because I told the student to text me to remind me, and they didn't do it. Not that it's their job, but I'm supposed to bring a collection of large shank tenor trombone mouthpieces for 2 students tomorrow to try. So I'm going to bring a bunch of mouthpieces, and basically every single one that I have that makes even some sense for their instrument. And they're going to try all of them, and then I'm not selling a mouthpiece, but if they like one of them, pretty much all of them are still being made, so they can just go online and order that exact same one. So that's an ideal thing. Not every teacher has a ton of mouthpieces, and I wouldn't even say I have a ton. I have a few. I don't have a small amount, but anything like that is relative. And like certain things like tuba mouthpieces, that's actually something I don't have a lot of. I have a lot of mouthpieces overall, but I've really stuck to my tuba mouthpieces over the years. Before switching to the Dennis Wick 1XL for C tuba, I played a Schilke 67 for basically a decade. I'd have to count it up, but from middle school to grad school. And so I didn't have a lot of other mouthpieces, and my F tuba came with a mouthpiece, and then I ultimately switched to a Dennis Wick 2. Even before being an artist with them, I played that 2 probably for 5 years before being an artist with Dennis Wick. That was a mouthpiece I played for a really long time. And yeah, I don't have a ton of tuba mouthpieces. I have a lot of trombone mouthpieces. The most I have is small shank trombone mouthpieces, probably trying to solve a problem with a mouthpiece, which is not always the best approach. And then I even have some mouthpieces that aren't mine, like some of Connor's mouthpieces or at least one of Connor's mouthpieces that he's.
Whoops.
Don't you have you have a Pickett here, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
A Pickett 7?
Yes. Pickett 7.
Wait.
Mouthpiece.
Yeah, which I played all of. I played all of one tune on a gig. It didn't work. It didn't work for me in my trombone. I'll put it that way.
Okay. Different strokes.
Right, and also a big thing that people don't always talk about is the connection between the mouthpiece and the instrument. You can have your favorite mouthpiece, but get a new instrument, and it may not be the best mouthpiece anymore.
Right, it might not drive anymore.
So I think that's definitely an important thing. So we got, what Dennis Wick should I use as a junior in high school? I assume you're still talking about getting a tuba mouthpiece, since we were kind of on that track. I feel very, not uncomfortable, but I feel like that's not an easy question to answer, having had no experience with you as an individual, you as a player. Even a junior in high school, that can mean a lot of things. There's a junior in high school that plays better than I do somewhere. I don't know them, but they exist. And then there's a junior in high school that sounds the same as a 6th grader at another school. So not to say that, basically my point is I have no idea where you're at, where your playing is, anything like that, what instrument you play on, those sorts of things. It's really hard to know. And also, like, at the end of the day, it's all trial and error. That being said, my general recommendation, which is on my desk here, is a Dennis Wick 2XL. I think that's a great mouthpiece. To me, it's I kind of call it an extra medium mouthpiece in regards to C tuba, and it's kind of like as far as an extra medium mouthpiece, meaning if you can't do something on that mouthpiece, you probably can't do it. And that's kind of my thinking in general, is that at least starting out with students, I tend to put them towards mouthpieces that are very middle of the road, that don't help or hurt with anything, which is not exactly possible, but that's kind of my thinking. So if you're getting a small sound, it's not, let's move to a bigger mouthpiece. It's like, let's help you get a bigger sound. Right. So the 2XL, I think, is a great mouthpiece, and again, one of the reasons why I love Dennis Wick, and I believe Connor loves them for the same reason, is that they're relatively affordable. I can't remember their pricing exactly on the tuba mouthpieces, but I think it's around $100, maybe more, maybe less. Let's see. I'm gonna go with 104. Do you wanna throw a number for Dennis Wick tuba mouthpieces? Because I know you're.
I'll say 125, just because I have never bought a tuba mouthpiece, and I'm guessing.
They're definitely more expensive than trombone mouthpieces. Looks like from Woodwind Brasswind, we're talking $99 exactly for a silver-plated classic series. So that's how much this mouthpiece right here would be. And again, I think it's a great mouthpiece. It's generally what I recommend, and it seems to work out for a lot of my students. The irony maybe is that I don't actually play one regularly. I do for certain things, but I don't play play it on my C tuba or my F tuba. I do play a 2L on my F tuba, which is very similar, but I play 1XL on C tuba. But I can't in good conscience recommend that to most students, because for most people it's too big. And even for me, it would probably be too big if I only had one tuba. But part of it is I have tools for different jobs, and when I pick up my 6/4 C tuba, it's to be a 6/4 C tuba, and I'm rarely, trying to play the highest tuba solo on it. I'm usually trying to make a pretty big sound. But I do use that 2XL. I don't know that I always perfectly notate it on this channel, but I do use a 2XL in some videos occasionally. Sometimes I'll just grab it and see, it's like, oh, this works out pretty well today. I'll use it. That's literally why it's within arm's reach, because it's sitting on my desk, and kind of all of the, second place mouthpieces are right here. What is this one? Oh, I don't want to show that one. But there are 4 mouthpieces on my desk right now. Sometimes I have to have mouthpiece secrets. But yeah, 2XL is again my kind of general recommendation. But I think that if you're taking that as fact, like that every junior in high school should be playing a 2XL, and if you're not, you're wrong, or something like that. That's not really what it's like, at least not in my mind. Connor, do you have any recommendations for a junior in high school tuba mouthpiece?
I sure don't.
Moving on then.
I have no concept of what the good note. I could tell you a 2, I could tell you a 6, I could tell you a 74.
I think you'd agree with a lot of the philosophies, though, that I just said, though.
Yes,
you know,
stick with like middle of the road for as long as you possibly can. I played on a 6.5 AL. I mean, like, I eventually in the middle of college bought like a 5G because my professor made me, but 6.5 AL went straight from 6th grade band to 2nd year grad school with me, and it did not switch around. And I don't even know if I should have switched then. I probably shouldn't have.
Yeah, and at some level, who knows? Ultimately, the most important thing is you, the player. Everything else is after that.
Yep.
So, let's see. I have 2 Shires trombone mouthpieces, a 5B, a 5MD, and had a Denniswick 5BL. Rims feel similar. Yeah, I have no idea. I mean, I'm sure I played a Shires mouthpiece at some point, but their mouthpieces are relatively new. I mean, relatively new makes me probably seem older than it. I think they probably had them for like 10 years, but yeah, I haven't played on a ton of them. But yeah, I mean, also that, rims feeling similar. How many different shapes are there really for mouthpiece rims? There are a few different.
There's a lot of different shapes.
Okay, but like within reason.
I had a weird one time. The Bach 5GB. You ever played one of those before?
I don't think so.
It wasn't flat. It was round, and it was
Yeah.
thin. It hurt.
I mean,
I don't know why you'd play on that thing.
That's why I said there aren't too many. That is one of them, and I don't like that style of mouthpiece. I don't. And just it feels.
Must really like it.
People do, and more power to them. I mean, I'm not trying to mouthpiece shame anybody for the mouthpiece they choose to play.
No.
I'm just going to play the mouthpieces I like to play.
Right.
And I encourage most people to do the same, so long as it's kind of, working out with, your teacher agrees and that sort of stuff. Any tips on slurring? Or did I skip one?
No, that was right.
Okay. Any tips on slurring high notes on tuba, as well as slurring from lower notes to higher notes while still maintaining a good tone? Yeah. I mean, I think that we're all still trying to approach the perfect slur. Have you played a perfect slur yet, Connor?
Nope.
Yeah, I'm still hoping. That's definitely a part of it, is that we're always trying to get better at that. I think that it's almost unattainable sometimes, in like not a bad scary way, but we're always approaching perfection, but maybe never quite getting there. So tips on slurring high notes on tuba. I mean, the first thing with slurs, if you're not hearing those pitches, and with so many things on a brass instrument, if you're not hearing those pitches, good luck. I don't know that it's going to work out for you. In the high range, notes get closer. If you're not hearing those pitches, you're going to play the wrong ones. In general, going to from lower notes to higher notes, I like to think about that note before the high note as being really important. I always call it the on-ramp. And so I always do the same kind of song and dance of saying, and I'll do it with you, Connor. You were the student in this case. Connor, do you drive a motor vehicle?
I do drive a motor vehicle.
Do you drive on the highway?
When I absolutely have to, yes.
What is the function of an on-ramp?
It's to get you going the speed of the other cars that are on the highway before you enter the highway.
To go from 40 to 70 or 40 to 60 or 30 to 60, whatever the case may be, right?
Right.
So that's to me what the note before it is. We put a little crescendo on it and use that to kind of help us get onto the highway being that high note. So I often recommend that, and I kind of am generally thinking that it's musical to crescendo to the high note because it's usually the high point of the phrase, and it almost always helps us. That being said, it may not always be the musically correct thing or the best musical thing in that situation, and maybe we don't do it in those situations, but a lot of times it is, and a lot of times it helps us.
There you go.
So that's kind of my overall thinking. Let's see. Yeah, I'm giving all my tricks away for free tonight.
Yeah.
I'm looking into getting a sound enhancer booster darkener for my trombone. I use a Schilke 51D. Your thoughts on them? To be honest, I haven't really messed around with them. That kind of also goes in line with, heavy walled mouthpieces, larger mass mouthpieces, that sort of thing. I'm kind of the mindset that it does do something. I'm not sure that I know the exact science of what it does. In general, I'm a thinner, less mass mouthpiece kind of person. I've owned two kind of, decidedly heavy mouthpieces in my life, and I didn't, I don't know. I guess I did play one of them for a while. The other one I didn't. I don't know that. What I will say, I don't know that everyone who puts one of those on their instrument or on their mouthpiece gets what they think they're getting. It's not to say they're not real. It's not to say they don't do something. But I don't know that I feel that they're magic, which I feel like is maybe what some consensus of it is. Do you have any thoughts, Connor?
I'm kind of uninitiated in that I don't know what a sound enhancer, booster, darkener, like what are we talking about mouthpieces that just have heavier stuff on them?
There are certain things that are like extra mass that you can put on a mouthpiece. Dennis Wick actually makes them. They call it a booster. There are others, but let's see if I can pull this up on screen here. So you'll get to see it in a few seconds, Connor. So these sorts of things, these boosters, which add mass to these mouthpieces. Again, I'm definitely not saying that they're not real. Let's see what it says on Dennis Wick's website as to what they do. I don't know that it really matters that we do trombone or trumpet or anything. I assume that their thinking is similar. A booster converts a classic mouthpiece to a heavy top and by adding extra mass which fits snugly around the existing mouthpiece. The booster extra rate helps transfer more energy through the horn to the bell, resulting in a more powerful sound, more secure high register playing, and more focused tone. Extra mass gives greater projection and also darkens the sound.
Huh. I guess I wouldn't know what to say just because I've never seen it before.
I've seen them. I haven't really spent a lot of time with them. Again, I that's kind of in the category to me as the harmonic pillar system that is found on Edwards. That I believe changing mass on things makes a difference. I believe materials makes a difference. I don't usually go for the small change sort of things like that.
I get you. Interesting.
Also, I didn't realize that this was there. Hopefully, Mr. Golden Guy is still in the chat. So, 2XL mouthpiece. The 2XL Dennis Wick is the number 2, the letter X, the letter L, not XXL. Which is, I realize how that was confusing and essentially unhelpful. Hopefully you still find it, but I don't believe they have an XXL mouthpiece.
The number 2,
right?
The letter X and the letter L.
Correct. So, and also with the 51D, which I believe I have one here. I do. That's one of the mouthpieces I have to bring tomorrow. The 51D, I don't know that you're going to get extra mass on this mouthpiece. I think that's maybe an important point too. I don't think the Dennis Wick one would fit. The Dennis Wick one is designed for a classic series mouthpiece. So if we look at both of these, classic, oh, I'm looking at the mirror image, classic and the 51D, you can see that there's a lot less mass towards the bottom of the Dennis Wick, which I think is mostly what that is trying to fill things in. And just feeling these two mouthpieces, which are both large shank, roughly 5 size mouthpieces, this one is already a lot heavier. So I really don't know that there's more mass to be added by one of those collars or sort of things. And James also says, if I can handle these comments, I played with him on trumpet and didn't feel a difference. However, I used one on euphonium. It made a world of difference with finding notes, especially while playing loudly. And if it plays better, if it works, I'm certainly not going to say, oh, it works better, you shouldn't do that. I just don't know that I feel the same way, at least in my experience.
Right.
And I think also it's just context things. In general, most things that I like are on the thinner side. Especially speaking of play a lot of nickel silver trombone slides, play a lot of thin bells on trombone. The Wilson I just got, I will say is heavy, and I do like it. But at the end of the day, there are lots of different ways to go about things, and if you feel like it helps you, I think it's totally fine. But again, I think that all of that aside, I don't think it's going to work on a Schilke 51D. I think that there's already not necessarily the maximum level of mass, but most of those are designed to help mouthpieces that are smaller or less massive, I guess is probably a better way to put it.
Yeah, less massive.
Less massive. So
yeah.
Specifically with the Dennis Wick one, it says that it's designed to convert a classic to heavy top. So it is designed to fit around this mouthpiece and turn it into, 1 second. And turn it into this mouthpiece. So it's designed to add this extra bit. Here, I can hold 3 mouthpieces without clanging them together. So you can see if I compare the heavy top to the Schilke, it does have more mass, but it's not. It's kind of in the middle between the two Dennis Wicks. So I just don't think that you're going to be able to fit that around there. But I could be wrong. I'm not necessarily the expert. Let's see. I think I may get one. We'll update on whether it makes a difference on heavy mouthpiece like the 51D. Yeah, and if it even works, maybe it will work, maybe it won't work. Any exercise you recommend for triple tonguing or to build stamina, especially for the euphonium Etude number 3? So a lot of what I would recommend with that one is slow triple tonguing. I think that people think that a lot of times that the triple tongue is just all of a sudden just going to be I just do it fast and it's great. I don't know that I think that that's the right way to do it. And in general, my practice with multiple tonguing is generally going to be if I know I need multiple tonguing, because at this point I kind of know when I need it and when I don't need it. If I know I'm going to need it, I will start my practicing with that in mind. So I'll start slowly with a multiple tongue. So in the instance of that etude, and I'm sorry, I'm going to put music that's not this music on the screen. I guess I can find it. Give me a second. I'll put the actual music on the screen. Do you have any thoughts about multiple tonguing, Connor?
Yeah, I'll say some stuff while you're pulling it up. I would say when I first started learning how to triple tongue, or really first had something I had to be triple tonguing for, I think in hindsight, looking back, what I was doing was always trying to triple tongue as fast as possible. And that was what I learned how to do, was just to go as fast as my body can go, and whatever
reflex tonguing.
That time, that's what it was. I was not developing a repertoire of tempi that I could accurately slot into, you know. And there was a saxophone player who came to UNT one time, Will Vincent, who talked about this paradoxically on the alto saxophone, not necessarily about triple tonguing, but about like any sort of articulation studies, like finding like tempos that you can play at and like intentionally playing like in that tempo so that you have a repertoire of velocities that you can most accurately do this exercise at. I mean, theoretically, all the way across the gamut, right? But if you're always just like going as fast as you can and still not quite fast enough and still not quite fast enough, you're not learning those to settle into that time along the way. You're just learning how to go fast, you know?
Yeah, so I'll play a little bit of how I practice this etude, because believe it or not, it did take me a long time to practice this etude. This was the one that took me by far the longest. That's why it was released last of all of the all-state music across all the low brass instruments. So in that, I played really slowly for a long time, just really, really slowly, with the tonguing that I knew I would be the most successful with. If I was spending more time with this etude, I might have chosen to practice in a different way or practice a slightly different tongue. I think that's probably, I think there's a lot that could be helped by, or there are different options for tonguing. And I knew what would be the easiest for me, which was using triple tonguing of playing ta 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 ka ta 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 ka ta 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 ka ta 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 ta, going back and forth like that, and that's what really helps me. It would probably also be okay to play ta ta ka ta ka ta ta ka ta ka, or that's also an option, I guess. I don't know that I'm ready to make a determination of which one is better and which one is correct. But those are both different options. Let's see, I'll put us back normal on the screen. And Brian's in the chat today. I think it's probably been a couple weeks since Brian's been here. So what album and song do you think you listened to the most in your lifetime? Do you want to go first, Connor, or should I go first?
I can give a non-low brass answer, but the album that I listened to most of my lifetime, there's 4 of them. They all tie. It's Weezer, Blue, Green, Pinkerton, and Maladroit, probably in that order, first being the Blue album. So there you go. There's my answer.
I think mine speaks to when I had my first car. I only had like 5 or 6 CDs in there. And I just listened to those 5 or 6 CDs probably an unhealthy amount of time and just like on repeat. And probably the one that I had in there the most was Marshall Gilk's Edendary.
There you go.
So, and probably the track was probably Puddle Jumping that was played the most.
Probably.
I don't really know what else to say about that.
I've got mine now. I think I know what
your low brass one?
Yes, it's Steve Davis' Eloquence. Probably the album that I've listened to the most.
Is that the one with the weird When the Saints Come Marching In one? No. Which one's that one?
That's the J.J. Johnson tribute album. The one with like Village Blues and Shortcake and all that stuff. Is With the Saints in that album? Are you serious? Or is it at the end?
Are we gonna have to delete this whole show?
Delete it.
Track 12, When the Saints Go Marching In. I don't want to play it, but it is exactly the one that I believe it is.
Yeah, okay, all right. This doesn't mean I don't like the album. This tells you more about my attention span than it does about anything.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about those first few tracks. You wore them out. And I would say Have You Met Miss Jones is the one that I listen to the most out of all of those.
I feel like your answer is just null and void at this point.
No, it's not. You can enjoy half of an album. And I'm allowed to do that.
So now you're saying you hated When the Saints Go Marching In.
That's not what I said.
That's what I heard.
All right.
But that, since Connor can't even remember the track names, we probably should just call the show there.
That's bad because my jury that one time was to play all the solos on that album, and I don't know if I can tell you how his solo goes on that track anymore. I can probably get a pretty good educated guess just because I've listened to enough.
I've got it right here. Never mind. We'll answer James' question instead. Have you thought about doing some multi-track songs on your channel? I was always pretty against it. I will say I have not had a change of heart necessarily, but I have thought of a way that I could do it in a way that I might be okay with doing. I don't think the world needs another Christopher Bill. I think if you want Christopher Bill stuff, Christopher Bill's got a great channel with all of his stuff that he does. And that's not exactly what I'm into doing. Like, I don't want to necessarily play those songs. They're totally fine. People do, and I know that people enjoy them. And I just think that there's no reason to try to be another Christopher Bill. That being said, I have thought about doing some things like that, but maybe more on the still keeping in the same vein of doing multi-tracks of things. And I guess also what maybe is relevant is Connor has some multi-tracks on his YouTube channel.
Sure do. Like a whopping 2. Also, by the way, the album that I was thinking of was Steve Davis' Say When, and they do When the Saints Go Marching In.
He has 2 versions of...
It's the same arrangement.
Is it?
Marching In with the flat 7 pedal. Close. There it is. It's a weird thing. It does. I know it's super hip,
I'll pull something up, but in the meantime, I'll let you start. I'm gonna pull something else up. What was your first paying gig?
It's a really good question that I don't know if I have probably like an Easter gig or something like that.
I can pretty well tell you what mine is, because I used to sub for my teacher, and when he had another gig, he would send me, and so I used to play at Walnut Street Baptist Church in Louisville. I played there a few times, which was televised, which was fun.
Oh.
So you get to hear. I was on I don't know what channel it was, but yeah, it was always a fun thing. So I think that was probably my first paying gig. So through Connor's YouTube channel in the chat. So
nice.
We got that there. How'd you go about learning a solo you have only ever done on a different instrument or different key of instrument? So I assume, Eli, you're talking about maybe relearning a solo that you played on C tuba and playing it on you're going to make or something like that necessarily. I don't think. I would just say going a little bit slower maybe than going as fast as you once had it, which is probably a good way of doing it if you're ever relearning a solo in general, is that you don't start at the tempo that you got to 4 years ago when you played that solo. That's not going to yield the best results. Also, Connor, you said you have a whopping 2 multi-tracks?
Mm-hmm.
Try 3.
Wow, I have 3.
Try 3.
Oh, I do have 3. That's true.
Fingerprints, Sandy's Blues, Blues for Ant-Man.
That's right. That was very early shutdown. Let's keep Connor busy with something sort of activities.
Can you play/sight read alto, treble, and or mezzo-soprano clef?
I'll let you answer that one.
Yeah, I mean I wouldn't say treble is fine. Treble is not a big deal. I'm not going to argue that sight reading, no matter what you're doing, has its limits. So it's not like, put this crazy thing in treble clef and I'm going to be able to read it perfectly, because I might not be able to read it if it was in bass clef. But treble, I would say, especially being a jazz musician, you kind of have to be able to at least do some treble.
It's a treble clef world out there.
Right. I'm probably better at reading B flat treble than concert pitch treble, but either of which is mostly fine. Alto clef. I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm amazing at sight reading an alto clef, but I can get by. The other thing too about alto clef, not that this is always true, but a lot of what we do in alto clef isn't something that you're going to sight read necessarily.
Right. It's like most of the alto clef that I've had experience reading has been things that like I already knew what it sounded like before I looked at it on the page.
Yes.
And I know that like the amount of music that we've all read in the course of our lives, it's a finite number, the amount of pages of music you've read. But I bet that I can get a lot closer to guessing how many pages of alto clef I have read in my life.
Right. So yeah, I think that my alto sight reading definitely could be better, and I guess that's now someone can find my weakness and prove that I can't do that. But yeah, I think that that's part of it. It's just I'm probably better at sight reading the clefs that I have to sight read most often, which does include treble. Don't get me wrong, but I don't know that my life really includes sight reading alto. I played pieces in alto clef and I can read them. And then Mezzo-Soprano Clef, I don't think that I've ever technically read music in Mezzo-Soprano Clef. I accept that it exists, but I don't know that I would. I mean, I can figure it out. I understand how clefs work at a reasonably acceptable level. So essentially, a lot of these clefs you just move, for those who maybe don't know, you move around where the clef is, and that changes what the lines are. So mezzo-soprano clef is the same as alto and tenor clef in that it's a C clef, but it's on a different line than the other two, which means wherever that center of that clef is middle C. So we can move it to any of the 5 lines, and that would be middle C. So I understand how it works, but am I going to impress someone with my sight reading in mezzo-soprano clef? Probably not.
I can do it live, though.
Yeah. Let's see. James says, let me pull this up here. Tenor clef is the same fingers as treble clef, just a different key because it's no longer being transposing for B flat instruments. That's a matter of perspective. So I guess the point there is that tenor clef and B flat treble are the same. Or they kind of work out as being the same thing, more or less. But yeah, I would say that I pretty much I've limited issues reading B flat treble, E flat treble, tenor clef, bass clef, alto clef. I'd be lying if I said it was up to par of all of those other ones. I guess I'd leave out C treble clef. C treble clef is also fine. But yeah, it's just a matter of practicing those sorts of things, and I don't know that I get the value out of practicing alto clef. I've never been in a recording session where I had to sight read alto clef. I've never been in an audition where I had to sight read alto clef. Most of where alto clef lives is in solo literature for the alto trombone and in orchestral pieces that are either on alto or sometimes on tenor. Generally speaking, it's very rare that you're going to have to sight read Scheherazade with no notice. But it could happen. Someone could request it, someone could miss out on a concert, have their car could not work or something like that. There could be some issue and you have to sight read it. But again, I would say that that's not super likely. Who's your main sound concept on each of your instruments in each style? Do you want to start, Connor?
Sure. I think I just said it. Steve Davis is probably, I don't know if I have like one person, but that's a person whose recordings I go back to a lot for sound and for language and all types of stuff. But yeah, if I could give a real simple one-person answer, probably a lot of Steve in there. But yeah, what about you?
Yeah, that's a complicated question. I don't think for any of them it's just one person. I think that's not saying that you actually are only thinking of one person, but there's one person's not enough for switching around styles and things like that. and also how deep is each style. But yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I don't know that I really have a good answer. I like taking things from a lot of different people. And I would say that for me, the instruments that I'm the weakest on are the ones that I'm maybe most focused on copying someone's style. And maybe weak is not the right word, but like I guess what I would say is with tuba, it's like I do so many different things with tuba, and I think especially with playing solos, I would say I more often have my own sound at this point. On like bass trombone, for example, I kind of think of a few different people depending on the context. But yeah, that's kind of a hard question that I don't know that I really want to answer, I guess, is probably the short of it.
Boo!
I know. I answer most questions.
It's okay. I was kind of thinking of it like for everyone, like their sound concept gets really developed, and there's lots of layers and influences and yada yada, but there's like...
It's like a web.
It's like a web, but I think there's like a certain point for me personally when I was like studying where I really started to like get fixated and really enjoyed one style of music and started copying, and then from that copying I was able to then differentiate and maybe refine things a little bit, or at least I think I do. It's probably just copying a bunch of licks, but it was somewhere around the time of getting really into Carl Fontana and getting really into Steve Davis that I think things started to click for me, like sound concept wise and mechanics wise. But even then, now I just had two people, so it's getting more complicated. So,
yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely people who I like their sound and people who I, maybe don't like as much. That's definitely part of it. But there's so many great players, and there's so much easy access to things. I would definitely say when I was younger, I was listening to a lot of JJ, and then I listened to a lot of Marshall Gilks, and then I listened to a good bit of Elliot Mason. But I don't know that it's like my sound concept is any of those, and I kind of don't necessarily want it to be. Sometimes I do, sometimes I think you borrow from those sorts of things. And even I was talking about in a lesson today, sometimes I borrow different styles and different things for one instrument. Like I was talking about playing a low C on F tuba, and most of the time I borrow from what I would think of as a C tuba sound. But sometimes it's rare, but sometimes I want to borrow from a bass trombone low C sort of sound, like a big band bass trombone. There are some tuba solos that I essentially try to sound like a big band bass trombonist on some low notes on F tuba. So I think that, to me, it's just kind of all it's a spectrum of things, and it's really a web of sort of things that I'm going over here for some things, going over here for other things. That's kind of a wishy-washy answer, and I'll live with that. Sorry, Brian. You asked a lot of great questions. That was probably one of the lower answers that you didn't want, but sorry. But we should probably call it there. We've been at it for a good little bit here, but we had so many good questions. It's hard to stop. Yeah. Mr. Eisenmenger, are you still interested in playing us out? Looks like you are set up and ready to go.
I can certainly do that.
Let's
we go.
Let's have it.
All right, we'll play once again. No melody of any copyrighted importance, and certainly no intellectual property being played here on this channel today. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you all later, eventually. Let me know if it sounds good.
I don't think you need to go down as much as you think you do.
Okay. Very good. Ooh, we got crusty.